Ladies and gentlemen, thank you for tuning in. This is the Punchline Podcast, and my name is Lawrence Seretse. It's another week, another episode. Today in the studio, I'm joined by Lebogang George, who is an accomplished attorney with over 10 years of experience. She's a corporate lawyer. She also deals with commercial law, data privacy, and data protection laws. Today, I invited her in the studio, obviously in the advent of these conversations about deadlines on KYC and BOCRA and all your commercial firms been on everyone's neck. Or please register your SIM cards before they get banned. So on top of that, we also want to learn from her about issues to do with online privacy and protecting yourself in the digital space. Lebogang George, welcome to the Punchline Podcast. How are you?
I'm good, thanks.
Oh.
Thank you for inviting me.
Finally, I recall when we met at the pre-elections Freedom of Expression Summit, and you made a submission in relation to the Data Protection Act or the Data Protection Laws. Mm-hmm. And I think I found your submissions quite interesting. You were with the team, I think, I forgot the lady's name, Karabo, right?
Yes, Ms. Karabo Mponang.
Yes, and I thought it would be interesting because I think the chance and the space was just limited at the time. It will be quite interesting to bring you on the podcast so that we can explore the interesting ideas and concepts we are bringing on board, right? So that's why I have you here today, and I appreciate that you managed to make time.
Thanks a lot. I really appreciate it.
Okay, fine.
Yes.
Let's go to it. My first question. I was reading your profile. It's quite extensive and impressive. I mean, as a young lady, I can see that you are a Havard alumni here. I can see that, actually you're recognized as Mail and Guardian's Africa Top 50 Botswana Change Makers in 2016. That's an LLB at Wits University. So, how did you get to Harvard? It's the first question I'm literally interested in.
Well, I don't know about other aspiring lawyers, but as an aspiring lawyer, that's always been my dream. You always want the Ivy League of law schools. And Ivy League of law schools for me was Harvard Law. So Harvard Law actually had a program in 2013. They had a program that they were doing. It was called the Law and Logic program that they were doing. And they were inviting a lot of aspiring lawyers to come and join this program. It was a 2-month program. So I saw it. And because I wanted to get into Harvard, I thought, you know what, the best way to get into Harvard maybe would be to do this law program. So at least I get a certificate, and then eventually I can then one day apply for a master's. So that is what I did. I applied for it, and lo and behold, I got it. I got in, and they hosted these at various countries. So the first one they hosted was in collaboration with another university called the European University Institute, which was in Florence, Italy. So they hosted this, and I was selected as one of the few candidates that they had selected. So I jumped on that because it was a gateway for me to actually get into Harvard when I could afford their master's program one day.
Okay, that's quite interesting. Were you specializing in Harvard, or were you doing just the broader?
I was doing the broader law and logic, so I wasn't specializing. So, I mean, for me, the aim was just to have Harvard in my CV so that eventually when I do my master's, then it's easier for me because I was already selected for this program. And it was a hard program because you had to also undergo a whole lot of interviews and a whole lot of motivation. And there was a lot that you had to do to get into the program. So it wasn't just a thing of you apply, close your eyes, and then, you know, it was a rigorous program that you had to do. So for me, it was, let me get in and then introduce myself to the professors that are at Harvard so that it's easier for me, like I said, to get into the master's program, because most of the time as a lawyer, you're taken seriously when you go to these Ivy schools and then you start specializing.
That's quite interesting.
Yeah.
Then what inspired you to specialize, especially try to look more at data privacy and data protection laws? Because that's what I met you doing, and you've been quite really emphatic about it. I thought Mostly, but I think it also falls under the auspices of commercial law or corporate law and all that. Please educate me and give me insight on what sparked your passion into that and what does it really mean?
So I think for me, I sort of, to some extent, I planned where I wanted to be and the type of law I wanted to do. So the reason why I went to Wits and I decided to go to South Africa was because at the time, there was not a lot of corporate commercial law firms in Botswana at that time. So this was years ago. So I wanted to get into corporate commercial law. I knew that I wanted to do that. I read about it. And I knew it had to do with agreements, drafting agreements, had to do with mergers and acquisitions. So that was something that was of interest to me. And I was not really interested in your typical going to court and doing a lot of court work. I really just wanted to do a lot of business and commercial work and economics. I wanted to get into that. So I knew that the gateway for that again was South Africa, because there's so many multinational companies, there's so many private companies that are doing all of this commercial work. So I went to Wits, started specializing in corporate commercial. I did my selectives were competition law, business law, contract law. That is what I started doing.
Okay.
After I graduated, I went to a law firm. The law firm is based in Ulovo, not so far from Sandton. And they then started getting into technology law, not because they really knew much about it, but because a client was inquiring about it. And none of us knew anything about it, but I put my hand up and I was like, you know what, I don't know what technology law is. I don't know what data protection law is and what privacy law is, but I'm willing to learn and get into it. So I started learning on the job, and I started studying it, reading about it, and assisting them. And this was it's the South African Revenue Services. So they were introducing a lot of AI and tech into their work and into their business.
Long was that?
Gosh, this was 2018.
Okay.
Yeah, this was 2018. So I started getting involved in that because I was interested and it was an interesting space to be in. And I was looking at technology agreements, software licenses, and it was just an interesting space to be in.
Obviously, then you relocate and come back here, and you are with the law firm. What do you think now you have to offer us as a country after all of this exposure and experience in terms of the data and privacy laws and all these online?
I think we're catching up quickly because obviously we don't want to be left behind. So we're catching up when it comes to data. We've got the Data Protection Act. So we are catching up to what's happening in the world. And I think in terms of what I have to offer, I mean, I was in South Africa and I was focusing on their Data Protection Act there, that's called the Protection of Personal Information Act. Okay. So already I know what's expected. When they were setting up the office there, the regulatory office there of the Protection of Personal Information Act, I was studying that, I was looking at that. So I already know what it looks like and what the framework should be if we're going to be mirroring that in Botswana. And I know that the Data Protection Act in Botswana mirrors quite closely what's happening in SA, and it mirrors the European version of it, the General Data Protection Regulation. So already I've got some insight in practically how to implement it, practically what needs to happen, practically how organizations can actually adhere to the provisions of the Data Protection Act.
But people tend to say that the act in itself seems to mirror a lot of European laws, in which really don't tally with the circumstances which we find ourselves in as a country. What do you have to say to that?
It does. I mean, the thing with us is, you know, sometimes we do have to sort of mirror and use legislation as a framework. And I don't think it's wrong for us to do that. We have to start somewhere. But I do think that we are learning. And it's, you know, we should do that, but then we should also localize it. So I think the amendments that are coming very soon, and I think in those amendments, that's when we're going to start localizing and making sure that at least it's practical for what is happening in our country, and also for the culture of Botswana when it comes to data protection, when it comes to data privacy. So it's okay to mirror, it's okay to use other legislation as a framework, but we will localize it, and we're learning. And I think we shouldn't fault ourselves and say, oh, but you're too Eurocentric. We're learning, and then we are taking the advice from people and businesses, letting us know that, you know what, practically this is not going to work. And hopefully we will, with the new amendments, hopefully they will be more localized. And if it is going to stick a little bit to the EU, then that's fine, because also we want to do business outside. We don't want to limit ourselves to just Botswana. We need to also go global and also do business globally. And for us to do that, we also have to think globally as well. We'll think globally and we'll act locally. So let our legislation be friendly enough for us to also do business and for us to also trade.
But in the context of this, we'll come and talk about the business issues, the corporate space. But I want to start with the civic space.
Yes.
Basically your social medias, your online, where just your ordinary people actually play or share information really on a day-to-day basis. Do you think people understand their rights and their privacy on social media?
No, they don't. They don't, because they're not educated enough, or maybe the problem is they're not given that, they're not given those tools to understand what the implications of their actions is when it comes to social media. And I think and I mean lawyers also need to play an advocacy role in terms of educating people about the implications of what they put on social media. You know, the reason I started writing articles to share freely on social media, because I wanted to educate people about their role when it comes to social media and when it comes to what they say on social media, and those people that are, I call them keyboard warriors, that just go ahead and talk and say what they want to say, because they're hiding behind a keyboard and they're hiding behind a pseudo name, and they think people are not going to know who they are. You know, there's not enough education. People don't know about the Cybercrime related act. They don't know about the Computer and Cybercrime related act.
What do they say, the act?
The act says you can't bully people, you can't hide behind the computer and bully people. So when there's social media bullying can actually be criminalized under the act. Even you bullying somebody on WhatsApp, even you talking about somebody's personal stuff and personal details on WhatsApp and bullying them on WhatsApp, somebody can also actually go and report you and say, but this is what you said about me, and I've got the information and it's here. So anything that you say, whether it's on WhatsApp, whether it's on X, whether it's on you know, Facebook, whether it's on Instagram, you're not allowed to do those things. You're not allowed to bully people. You're not allowed to share people's personal information. You're not allowed, also when it comes to revenge porn, all of those things are under that legislation. And I think people don't know.
But help me understand these legislations. I know there's the Data Protection Act of 2018. There's the Cybercrime and Computer Related Act. There is another one, instruments. Are
you thinking about the electronic transactions one?
Electronic transactions. Is it also part and parcel of a family of these laws that have to deal with protecting people from cybercrime or cyberbullying? I just want to learn from you how all these laws maybe reconcile in a way that they can protect me or protect the other person from me when I'm bullying them.
Okay, so the Computer and Cybercrime Related Acts has to do specifically with online bullying and social media and the actions that people take on social media when it comes to bullying, or even, you know, social media, it's related to your phone as well, whatever you do on your phone. If you decide to maybe take pictures with a significant other, and then it goes south, and that person decides to share your pictures and nudes, and that person decides to share your nudes. Revenge porn. you can actually go and they can be, that's a crime. They're not supposed to do that.
It's a criminal act.
It's a criminal act. And the good thing about this is that our police are actually taking it seriously. You know, sometimes people say, hey, we've got so many laws, we've got so many regulators, we've got so many this, but when it comes to enforcement, nothing happens. But the good thing is it's been tried and tested. Police are taking this seriously. You know, there's an instance where a client of mine was being bullied on WhatsApp and she was trending. And this other person was putting statuses on WhatsApp and doing things on WhatsApp about the client. And the client went to the police and said, I'm being bullied on WhatsApp. I'm being bullied. Look at this. I've screenshot this and I'm being bullied.
And that bullied person, how? I'm trying to just understand the context of what was going on.
Bullied is in, you know, like there was information that was shared and they were talking about this person in a horrible, malicious manner on WhatsApp. And every status, every 2 minutes, they'll put up a status about this person and sharing personal information about this person that they were privy to because at the time they were friends. And sharing information and putting up and bullying and just saying mean stuff to that person.
In this instance, what do the police do? I mean, if someone were to raise, I'm just trying to also get to the bottom of this because I see it happening almost on social media. I mean, I have the privilege of having been an editor of a newspaper for almost a decade and understanding legal structures and legal pitfalls on what you do with information and what you can actually get into trouble for saying against other people, libel and defamation. Makes me at least have a bit of understanding when I see things happening on the cyberspace. And I've seen an instance where a case where a certain tycoon was defamed via tweet. Then he didn't only sue the originator of the tweet, he proceeded to sue all 200 people who had retweeted the same thing. Do people really, in our context, Botswana, understand these things, and what can we do?
No, I don't. People don't, because you keep seeing it happening. You keep seeing people bullying each other on X, bullying each other on Facebook because they don't understand, or maybe they're not taking it seriously enough because they're thinking, like I was saying, they think that they're not going to be any consequences. So I think what needs to happen is one, maybe that public education. You know, maybe through these kind of platforms, people should be educated on, you know what, the implications to your actions, all right? The consequences to your actions. If you are going to tweet something that is malicious, that is untrue about somebody, you can be imprisoned, you can be fined. And the best way to do that is through these platforms, I think, and just letting the public know that, listen, these legislations are available, you don't do things like that. And maybe also these online social media platforms should probably also put links to the various legislation in all these countries, because they have access to all these countries, to show them that, listen, if bullying happens, as much as they always have disclaimers, they can have a disclaimer to say, listen, if bullying happens, there are consequences, and there is this legislation in terms of this country, and you will be held liable. That is also one example, and where people can actually, because you're already on X, you can see, and then you can be like, okay, these are the consequences. There could be a warning.
What are the actual consequences? Because we don't see them and we don't know them. Up to now, I've only had maybe of one incident is it cyberbullying?
Yeah.
That I know there's an ongoing case with someone who's a former journalist who had leaked nudes that were involved in someone. I don't know how far the case is.
Yeah.
But on many occasions, on a daily, you get on social media, you find people breaking this very same law. And is it a question, how effective really is this law?
I think the problem with this country is that we don't have a lot of access to, you know, like breaches or consequences of the legislation. Like you can't Google it and find out who was charged, who, what happened and all of that, because in other countries, if somebody leaked nudes, you know who leaked nudes and you know what the consequences are and what happened to that person. Whereas here, it's more private. You don't have access to that information unless you're a lawyer and it's your client, and then you can talk about the various cases that come through. But otherwise, it's not there for public consumption. You're not going to know of these things. But I'm saying that this is what we've seen, and we've actually witnessed our clients actually going to police station, and we've seen police actually for the first time, because we like to chastise police and say, oh, but they're not doing their work. But we've seen for the first time that they're actually taking this seriously, and we've actually seen them punishing these people, whether it's through fines, whether it's through them spending a weekend in jail. We've actually seen it happen. Yes, it's not recorded, it's not documented, but it does happen. And hopefully going forward, maybe it can be documented so that people can see that the actually consequences and the actual people that are being charged and that are actually in jail. But also at the same time, people have their right to privacy. So unless it's gone to court, you're not going to know who the person is. So they have to be anonymous, and no one is going to tell you who those people are, because they do have that right. So unless they're formally charged and then it goes to court, then you have access to that. But as lawyers, I'm saying, we've seen it happening. Maybe it's up to us as lawyers to also just make people aware that this legislation exists and this is what happens, or maybe even the police.
I would like to boldly make a call that I don't think it is enough.
Yeah.
Because what I'm seeing playing out here in this space is that look, we can't wait for the police to come in, then you have a case, and that means when the police are coming through and the law is actually being applied, that's after the post-incidents.
Yeah.
That means already the violation would have taken place. And most of this violation, I think, because of my observations, possibly happened because people are ignorant of the law. And also people are ignorant of their own rights on the digital space. You see, we are going into the silly season. We are going into the election season.
Yeah.
You are going to be seeing a lot of that, right? From both spectrums. You have observed what has been ongoing about this pastor, prophet, whatever, who has been charged with violating
and it was in the news last
defiling
night.
children. Okay, he has broken the law, right? That's fair. The long arm of the law is taking its course. But you read the comments, right? You read the comments. You can see the cyberbullying that's happening against. I'm not speaking on his behalf, but I'm saying then you lift
There's
that.
innocent until proven guilty.
Then you lift that and you go to. There was an issue Sadidi Khaka some other time where she was cyberbullied on body shaming and all the likes. And the question is that are we learning enough from these things? Am I safe when I'm going online? Is my 14-year-old daughter safe when she goes online? And I want us to look at this before we even call the cops. What role and what needs to be done to enhance our safety in these spaces?
Okay, and then I'll also throw it back to you and say, what is also the role of media? Because we also can't be looking at one party or one entity or one organization. Media also plays a role to educate people, to sensitize and educate the masses. So if you have access to this legislation, or when you do your research, you read up on legislation, right? You read up on laws. So you also, as media, have a role to sensitize and let people know this is the law that's out there. This is the legislation that's out there. Know about it. These are the consequences of if you break this law, this is what happens.
But I'm sorry to interject. You see, sometimes we put in laws, and laws are just instruments in black and white sometimes. They don't mean anything to a 14-year-old child or to my grandmother or whatnot. Maybe as academics and we will bother to read people don't even read T's and C's at the bottom of the contracts when they are signing them at Orange. Even yesterday when they're doing their KYCs,
Yeah.
I'm sure they didn't read that bottom part about the KYCs that speaks to these things. I'm trying to say that laws, there are nuances, right? Laws don't just exist.
Yeah.
They exist within a society that has a culture. And exactly what is our culture towards our behavior on social media and these laws? Is our culture, that's why the EU thing maybe keeps on being raised, that kind of some of these laws sound like they are being made for people in Europe. Because people in Europe complain about the small things.
Yes.
But Botswana, how
Eh.
even naive, but we don't realize that. So I don't know, are the laws enough? Or beyond just public education, because maybe also the media, what else can we do in terms of public awareness?
All right. One, I think the laws are enough. I think if we have too many laws, then, then it's a question of how do we implement them? And then now you're going to also create different bodies to oversee and to overlook, and then you're going to over-regulate a lot of things. And over-regulation, we know, stifles innovation and creativity. So the laws are enough. It's educating people about the laws, number one. Number two is also making sure that we enforce those laws, because it's one thing to have a law and then you don't enforce it. So we need to enforce it. Whether we're having the right people in place, if you've got a Data Protection Act, we have to have an office that makes sure that they actually have teeth to make sure that if people violate people's privacy, whether it's a 14-year-old's privacy online, whether it's a 90-year-old's privacy online, that regulator, that commission, that office actually enforces it. So it's about, one, educating the public. Two, implementing laws.
Okay.
Putting the right people in place. Three, making sure that there is enforcement, making sure that there's consequences, making sure that when you do bully somebody online, there are consequences, making sure that people don't just bully and don't just do as they please online. So that is also up to, one, I guess, law enforcement as well. That is also up to the people, maybe the lawyers as well, that have to make sure that these things are implemented and these things are enforced. There's no use having laws when they're not enforced.
And hey, there's a rise in cyber hacking, yeah?
Yes.
A lot of people's pages have been stolen and never to come back. Like one of my friend, the learned lawyer, where is he? He has disappeared. Since they stole his page, and he was very, very active. I think it was about a year ago.
Yeah.
He disappeared into oblivion in the digital space.
Yes.
And it could happen to businesses. I'm saying that businesses, for example, especially media houses that do trade on content on a daily. Imagine a whole social media page for Mir gets hijacked and ends up in the wrong hands.
Yeah.
What kind of disaster that could happen in terms of disinformation and misinformation in our society. Speaking about that, I was going to want to learn something from you, where I was reading about this the Cambridge Analytica scandal, the one that got Facebook in trouble.
Yeah.
Because what did they do? They were giving their data to this research company,
Yes.
so that they can try to engineer the outcome of elections and all the likes. Not only that, I'm trying to look at it from a corporate entity perspective. We were just giving our KYCs just about a day ago to these big corporate firms. How are we sure that our data is protected, our privacy is protected as we are sharing this information, and how do we know that they do not use it for things that we have not given them the permission to?
The short question is, we are not sure that we're protected. That is the reality. We're not sure that we're protected because the whole thing with us being in this tech and digital revolution that we're living in is that it's borderless. We're sharing our information on a daily,
Yeah.
We all have Netflix accounts. So our information, by virtue of having a Netflix account, your information is sitting elsewhere. You know, by virtue of you going on Take-A-Lot and buying and ordering shoes or a book on Take-A-Lot or Amazon, your information is not sitting in this country. You know, so we're constantly trading, and by you also having an account on X, by you going on Google, your information is not sitting in this country. And
are you saying our local companies are not selling our information for marketing purposes? And
I'm not saying that. I'm just saying that we also, as people, one, we need to read the T's and C's that you mentioned, but we don't do that. So if I go to a mobile network and I'm doing my KYC with them and I'm signing or I'm getting a SIM card, do I read the T's and C's to see what they're saying about my data? Do I care about what they're saying about my data, how they're using my data beyond SIM registration? I'm not looking at that. All I just want is a SIM card. That's all I want. I just want a SIM card. That's it. I'm not looking to see what they're doing with the information. And sometimes by virtue of you not seeing what they're doing with that information, you're signing things. And maybe that little T's and C's at the bottom in that small print is saying, we will share your information with third parties, whether it's marketers, auditors, creditors.
And we haven't read that.
And you haven't read that, but by virtue of you signing, you've consented to them. So then you'll have third parties, marketers coming to you saying, oh, hi, we want to sell you this, and you're wondering where did they get my information? Because you did not read the
And Facebook does that a lot, huh? And Google.
They all do that.
If you speak on the phone or you interact with your device over something, a product, sooner or later you see it popping up through the algorithms.
Yes.
You go into your Instagram, you search, you start seeing the web of related.
In some way you've consented to that because, like I said, there will be the T's and some of them have privacy statements. So a privacy statement is basically just a statement saying, we're collecting your data, this is what we're doing with your data. We may share your data with third parties. These third parties are marketers, this. But you won't, how many of you read that? You won't go onto their legal site and read that. You just sign because what? You want to be able to Google. You want to be able to stream something on Netflix.
Okay. In this context, the AI is really growing and is bit by bit becoming part and parcel. It has been, but I think we are being more exposed to it as it's advancing. What's your view in the context of Botswana with all this AI that's coming to take part in how we do business and conduct our daily lives?
I think it's an exciting time. I know that people are worried because they talk about job security, but I think that you don't have to worry about your job if you do embrace it. And AI, yes, there's some instances where it will probably take over some jobs, but there are also instances where it would create new jobs. I mean, never did anybody imagine that you'll have data protection officers, or you would have AI officers, or you would have AI governance officials? You now have it. And in the context of Botswana, I think people are not aware that we've already started really using AI, especially in the mining sector. You already have autonomous self-driving vehicles, self-driving cars in the mining sector. And it's an exciting time, and I think we need to embrace it. And I think when we're talking about legislation and AI governance, some people think, Botswana doesn't need to worry about that right now. I think we should worry about that because it's already happening in our mining sectors. Let's worry about it. Let's be involved in it, and let's embrace AI as Botswana because jobs are being created around what's happening at AI.
In your entire profession, what interesting legal case have you come across in relation to data privacy and all these protection laws?
There were 3 recently, but I'll just talk about the one, which was pretty interesting. It had to do with ChatGPT.
Okay.
And it was actually lawyers that used ChatGPT for their case.
Oh.
Yeah, so instead of actually reading and researching, they decided that they're going to use ChatGPT to help them win a case. So when they got to court, this was in South Africa and also happened in America.
Oh.
When they got to court, they were dismissed by the judge, both instances, and the judge said to them, your findings are wrong because you relied solely on ChatGPT. So this is for people who say that they're afraid that AI and technology is going to take over their jobs. But they're things that also humans have to do to make sure that AI...
You have to apply logic.
You have to apply logic. And also, AI works on your data too. They work on what human beings are saying and telling them. That's how they get better. So the judge threw out the case and said, no, listen, you were being overzealous and you were reckless in that you didn't research. You didn't do...
How did the judge know that they used ChatGPT?
Because then they read the heads of argument. So what you call the heads of argument to see why they're saying that they should win the case and what they're bringing forward. So he read that and then he saw that they cited wrong case law that was not even, had nothing to do with the case. In most instances was not even anything in the country. So then they cited the wrong cases to try to win their case. And they said, no, ChatGPT failed you here because you fed them the wrong information and you were not precise and explicit about exactly what it is that you are looking for. You had to then go and double check and make sure that what you're telling ChatGPT is in fact correct. So then they threw out the case and then they said, in as much as AI is great, you need to make sure that you use logic as well. And you have to also use your research and go old school still and make sure that you research. So that was the most interesting one. I can't say. So you also have to do that. And then there was also the Uber case, but this was a couple of years ago where I get it now they're using self-driving cars.
Yeah, the Uber case,
Yeah, they're using self-driving cars. And so when the Uber was going to deliver something to this to a client, then on the way it knocked down a pedestrian, right? And the pedestrian died, unfortunately. So at the time it was a whole thing of what do we mean by what's a driver? Because no one is driving it. It's self-driving. So it's what's a driver? Can we charge this person? How do we charge? Who do we charge? So then they had to look at, now we have to amend the laws because the basic law on who is a driver, it means somebody who's sitting behind the steering wheel, holding the steering wheel and controlling the car.
The legislation was behind.
The legislation was behind. So now they had to look and they had to update the legislation and, okay, because now we're starting to adopt these self-driving cars, who is the developer of this app? Who is sitting and holding the screen to navigate and to see where the car is going, where the car's supposed to go, to control the car? We look at those two. Then that becomes the new definition of who is the driver. Okay. And then eventually it was held that the person that was holding the phone and controlling the remote control and controlling where the car is going should have been the one to anticipate that there's a pedestrian over there. And they should have stopped the car and controlled and stopped it immediately. But they failed to do that. So that person was charged.
Quite interesting.
Yeah. So those are interesting developments that are happening in the space of AI that I can share.
But what's your view on Botswana's e-government program?
I spoke about this, and it has to be a collaboration between government and between the private sector, simply because technology and investing in IT infrastructure and the proper software and getting developers, it's expensive. Okay. All right, and we know that government has a problem with resources in terms of finance, where projects like this are going to be financially exorbitant, you do need to partner with the private sector. And I think it's a collaboration that government needs to have with the private sector, because a lot of governments globally are moving there, and it's the safer option really, because government holds very sensitive information. Of course. So I think it's a conversation that they need to have with the private sector, because it's going to be very expensive, and to invest in security, because we spoke about how data can be used to share and make money, and people can actually steal your data. So if they're holding sensitive information and government is doing it alone, it's not going to use the most expensive resources. So it needs the private sector to to help them in terms of capital.
So that we really fall into the auspiced Internet of Things in terms of that. When you say the private sector should help them, I'm trying to understand exactly how do you mean, financially or it being a partnership in a sense?
It should be a partnership. So a lot of the times, you know, you have what you call public-private partnerships,
yes,
right?
triple Ps.
Yeah. So you have that in situations where government needs the assistance of private for instances like these, you know. So it could be financially because private sector has the financial muscle. So financially, so that they can assist with cybersecurity infrastructure, because as soon as you start getting into e-government, you know that there's sensitive information, even health information, financial information relating to individuals, even related to people that are in the government sector. So you need people to ensure that we don't get hacked easily. As soon as you start making something like this, hackers are there wanting and are ready. So it's therefore to share costs. To share costs between, so that you don't overextend government, because we also need government to carry out facilities and to carry out their responsibility and their day-to-day running of basically the country. So you don't want them to be depleted. So it's just to share that capital extensive costs or intensive costs that we know comes with e-governance and IT infrastructure and IT software.
And obviously ensuring that there is ethical use of data.
Of course.
Across devices. But quite interestingly, Lebo, what would you advise a young aspiring professional who wants to make a mark in the law and technology, basically? I think that's where the future is moving.
Yeah. Woo-hoo. I think, listen, always be on top, because technology is moving so quickly. The added advanced page, just always be in the know.
Yeah.
Read, be in the know, interrogate legislation, and do it because, don't do it because it's in fashion.
Oh, yeah?
Because most of the time people tend to do things because it's on trend and it's in fashion. Do it because you genuinely have a passion for it. And don't be too stuck on the law too. Get to know really what AI is about. Get to know the different types of technology. Get to interrogate the world of IT, the world of software, because you also need to be technical when it comes to law and tech. Be technical, don't be too theoretical, don't be too law focused, because practically you also need to know, as a lawyer, how can legislation really aid when it comes to IT, when it comes to AI governance. Don't be too stuck in the theoretical part of things. Get to also know, like, even if you have to get into the fintech space, get to know the fintech space, get to know the agri-tech space, get to know all the tech spaces that are out there, get to know about telemedicine, get to know about construction and tech. Every tech space that you can get into, get to know it, so that you know practically also how data protection applies to all of these tech spaces. Otherwise, you're not going to be able to advise your clients in the tech space, in the fintech space, in the banking space. You won't even be able to do that because you don't understand their business. You don't understand what they do with their data. Yeah.
Tell me, what were you doing in Egypt?
Egypt was a conference for the youth.
Okay.
So it was a youth conference we were hosted by the president. And he actually, it was like a talk shop.
Yeah.
And we were discussing ideas on how to take Africa forward, and what leaders can do to assist the youth in taking Africa forward and disrupting the places that they are in. So it was called the Leadership Summit, where we were gathered to just talk about what resources we need. Do we need capital? Do we need support from the older generation to assist us in creating a name for ourselves and in moving Africa forward? And basically it was just them trying to get us also to be involved politically and to be involved in government, in the government sector, because we can't always complain about the same thing as young people.
Of course, I mean, there's a need for a mindset change. Actually, that being said, what is it that our local youth really need? Because I know there's quite a large pool of software engineering graduates, IT graduates, and all these are related academic structures. But I would like to know what, before I go, there's a lot of unemployment, and we have seen it. And I often say that sometimes we wait to be employed, or we are looking towards government to save us, we are looking towards the private sector to employ us and whatnot. What is it that we can do ourselves, and what do we need? What kind of advice would you give?
We need to start now. Stop looking for employment. Stop looking for handouts. Start looking for help. Start where you are. Like you're saying, there are graduates that are there. There are graduates that are capable. We are now living in, in an era where you don't need formal employment to make a lot of money. You can just start with a phone even to start making money. There are a lot of problems. I was at a summit and somebody spoke about Africa being blessed with problems. There's a lot to solve in this country. There's a lot to solve. Try to figure out how best we can make sure that the public health care situation or access to information, how can we make sure that we help our government develop software that can make things easier for us? How do we make sure that the government starts digitizing our data instead of having data in files and losing our data? How do you get involved in that? How do you approach government to say, can I digitize your department so that people don't have information that is lost? How do we make sure that we put it in a cloud and we
So they should be
that?
able to come up with those concepts and develop, at least nowadays, Ghana, it's apps. And
Yeah.
apps and apps everywhere. Do you think our youth are really developing enough of what really belongs to us? I mean, right now, for example, when it comes to music, we are using Spotify, Apple, and all of that. How about we have our own indigenous apps that we can be able to find, be it local writers, be it local music, be it what local law literature says and judgment and all of that. How are you guys from an innovation point looking at it as you are discussing around this?
I think I'm always trying to push the Botswana Innovation Hub because it is there for young people like that.
Yes.
It's there to educate them. It's there to make sure that it gives them access to IP, IP laws, IP lawyers. It is there to make sure that it houses them and incubates them and mentors them and actually tries to give them ideas on solving problems and trying to say, create these apps, do this, because it has access to that. It's a government hub, so they know what the problems are in Botswana. So I'm always trying to push the Innovation Hub to actually mentor and take in these young people and train them. And they're supposed to be doing it for free. Train them.
They are actually.
Yeah. Train them, put them in. You just have to apply.
Yes.
I don't know how many people know about what the Innovation Hub is doing, but they also need to put themselves out there. Take these people, nurture them, incubate them, train them so that they can also have access to the world and they have access to the global economy. Because Botswana Innovation Hub all the time has these events and invites these innovators and techpreneurs from all over the country to come mentor ours as well. So they also know what's expected of them. They don't need to get out of. I feel like if they are able to solve the problems that we have in this country and everything that we complain about, they are able to also make a mark for themselves and make that money and develop and create a niche for themselves.
So what are you doing now?
What am I doing?
Hey, I heard you guys have some innovative ideas that are coming that we have to look for in the future. Or they are still a bit under the carpet.
They're still a bit under the carpet.
Yes.
They're still a bit under the carpet.
Like it's anything. Hey, yes.
No, they're still a bit under the carpet. I think
Okay.
in my little corner, because you were saying, what are we doing to educate people about the laws and what's happening? In my little corner, what I do is I speak, at summits, I write articles, like I was saying, about the different laws pertaining to data protection and privacy and AI as much as I can. I try to educate people about that. I try to give people access to information because, like I said, in this country, we don't have access to information. Legislation, bills, whatever you're looking for, we hardly have access to that. Even if you Google it, you can't find it. I'm trying to create a platform for people to access information because knowledge is power, and I want people to be informed when they make the decisions that they make.
Okay. So are you doing this with your partner or your...
I'm doing this on my own, in terms of I've been doing it on my own, no matter who I'm with, which organization or, which company I'm with. I just push this on my own because I do sometimes see that when you are working for a company, you can't always give things for free. You have to charge them. So I do this on my own. Yeah.
Okay, since I'm allowed to violate your privacy, speaking of partners, are you dating?
So do I give the answer before what we were chatting about before we did this, or do you want the answer?
I don't know. Okay, well, let's move.
No, I'm not dating.
What's happening in the scene of your life?
What's happening in the scene of my life? Absolutely nothing exciting when it comes to the dating field. But I told you, there's a difference between the dating and the relationship, right?
I've been trying to wrap my head around that. Can you please explain it to me? What's the difference between being in a relationship and dating?
So I was listening, like, don't quote me. I'm just quoting a relationship coach that I happened to stumble upon when I was driving, and I was listening to, there's a difference between dating and being in a relationship, and they were saying dating is like when you're freelancing. You're not committed, you're not employed, you're freelancing. You can go to Lawrence, you can go to whoever, you can go to whoever, and they all know that you're freelancing. They don't have an issue with that. And if Lawrence sees me talking to somebody at an event, Lawrence is not going to get upset because Lawrence knows I'm a freelancer. And then the relationship is
Yes.
the relationship is we are committed.
Okay.
We are committed, it's exclusive. It's like when you're employed. You're not freelancing, you're employed. You're not doing any other work for anybody but that person. So your employer sees you with somebody else. They should be worried.
Is it a thing of the new school kids and whatnot with breaking barriers and doing things unorthodox and it's acceptable? Because I see it quite a lot with Gen Z and all the likes. What?
Not a Gen Z, but I'm glad you think I am one. But it's acceptable because it's honesty, I think.
Yes.
As long as you're not hurting anyone and as long as you're honest and upfront, then that's all good. And I think maybe the good thing about this generation that I love about this Gen Z is that they're very honest and they do things differently. And their honesty, especially when it comes to dating and relationships, no one is really hurting anybody, Whereas other people, they date around, but they're in relationships, and you're like, well, you're in a relationship, but you're dating. So at least, I respect the honesty, and I respect that they do things the right way, the right way in terms of.
But for me, it begs a question because the nuances of young people of today and how they do things, it's not like I'm old, and how they do their things is different from the era where we come from, obviously the mentorship that we have been handed down.
Yeah.
And I always find it quite like, okay, they use this word, they say it's liberating. And I always find it quite difficult to acclimatize to like earlier on when I was talking about, is it ignorant? Or are people just carefree, especially on the social media? Because if we were to go on Facebook right now, we won't even scroll twice before we see people just being liberated with everything that they want to do in that space. Is it us expressing our freedoms and our rights, or we are just, we have lost our morals? sometimes?
No, I think liberation and expressing yourself is completely fine if you're not hurting anybody. So I think let's consider, because we're not living in a vacuum. We're not alone. We live with people. We exist with people. So if you're going to do your freedom, that's why even in the Constitution, there's limitations to certain freedoms, because they shouldn't infringe on other people's freedoms and other people's rights, right?
Yes, yes.
So if you're going to do something, do it, but don't hurt other people. You know, don't limit other people's freedom, or don't step on other people's liberties and other people's rights. So do things, even on social media. Yes, you have the right to express yourself. You have the right to say what you want to say, but it shouldn't impede on other people's rights and other people's dignity. So do things, but do it remembering that you live with people, that you also have some responsibility to your neighbor and to people you live with, you know, and to people that you're going to be existing with. You know, everybody's all for freedom. And I think, you know, as much as we can talk about this generation and say, oh, they've lost their morals, oh, I wouldn't do this, hey, they're this. But to some extent, you got to admire them, because they do speak their mind. You can learn a lot from them in that they're very brazen and they're very brave. They're not the generation that, for the most part, that sits and lets things happen. And they're not the generation that is just about, oh, I'm going to go find a job and make money. We didn't know that you could make money by being an influencer. They taught us that. They taught us that you can make money by being an influencer. You can make money just sitting and being on your phone. So there is the freedom is because they knew that you can make money using a tool, and you don't need to go to work and be like a yes ma'am, yes sir type of person. So there's that to admire. And like you said, I don't think they've lost their morals. I just think that we also have a part to play in teaching them and showing them and mentoring them on not impeding on their freedom, but just showing them that this is what you do, or maybe this is how you do things. Yeah.
I think you highlighted something very quite interesting there. I don't know whether it's an opportunity or an advantage that I see. I mean, making money from home, as they are always saying, and never get to understand how, but you see it out there. Maybe one day I'll have someone on the show here to just come and try to take me into that world, to understand how people make money just out of the click of a button. But I'm much more like, if that is the case, and then you have a situation where the rest of us as a country are a bit behind, and we are supposed to be their market. Isn't there a divergence of growth into the new way of doing things, and audiences and clients, possibly the market that is still rigid in the old way of doing things? How can we be able to reconcile those?
I think, obviously you have to, it's either you adapt or die, right? So if you're not going to adapt to the way new things are happening and how people are moving in the world, then you're going to be left behind. So the best way to do that is you rather adapt to how things are being done. If you don't adapt to it, nothing's going to happen. Things are not going to move. So if you don't, then you're left behind. That's just the way things are. It's just the same way with people who say, oh, no, I'm not going to learn about AI, or I'm not going to get on this digital and technology wave. You're going to be left behind. You know, like, we can look at the way things were done with back in the day with your Nokias, with your Kodak. Kodak died. Why? It didn't adapt. Kodak didn't adapt. It did things old school. You took pictures and then you framed pictures. It didn't realize that their phones now, nobody prints things and frames it anymore. We've got pictures on our phones, and these devices that we put on our pockets, we're taking pictures, we are now putting them on Instagram, and now we have Instagram as our new Kodak. So people that don't, even consumers, if you don't adapt, you get left behind. Then you're not going to be able to consume life-changing products.
Yes, yes.
Yeah.
I like that. And actually, before we wrap up, there's something of critical importance that I was going to live out, that I actually want you to educate me on. I remember at some point when we were writing about the new data privacy law that is now enacted as an act of 2018, there was an issue on the right to be forgotten. And there was complaints that is not included in the act.
Yes.
Can you please educate me a little bit about the issue on the right to be forgotten, because I believe that a lot of people are not privy to what this means.
So really that's also a European, it's the European GDPR has that. So that legislation, you can request to be forgotten. So it's basically erasing you from, like if an organization had your details, it's erasing you as if you never existed, as if you never went to that organization and applied for a loan, for example. So they're supposed to completely get rid of your information. Even if you even if someone says, hi, did this person ever have this, they can't access it. So literally it's like you're dead. That's what it's trying to say, that you are dead and nobody can ever retrieve your information.
Yeah, I'm trying to say, I literally pictured it in a sense of dead and gone.
That's what it's supposed to wipe out your information and make sure that even deleted information is not available. Stored information, nothing is available from you. It's like you never existed in that organization.
How does it apply? When I'm saying that, I imagined it as a thing that someone would do. I was imagining it that I would write a will and say, when I die, please erase me. Is it a similar thing, or is just related to when you are alive and you are requesting for your information to be?
So it's for when you're alive. So the whole intention behind it, my understanding is that the whole intention behind it was just to make sure, because sometimes organizations hold on to your data. They even store it without you knowing. They store it.
20 years according to law, yes.
Yeah, they store it. Even after 20 years, they still have it. And then somehow it goes missing, or you find it somewhere else and someone has stolen it. So it's just for security reasons to make sure that nobody will ever have access to your information, that your information will never be stolen. So it's just securing you and your personal data to make sure that, God forbid, anything happens to that organization or it's taken over by someone, then your information is not still going to be in the premises by people that you're no longer working with, or you no longer gave them permission to have your data. So it's just you as Lawrence protecting yourself and your information and making sure that nobody has access to that information at all. It's erasing you from the surface.
Quite interesting. Well, you have the right to be forgotten. I mean, we can totally erase you as if you never existed, if you so wish. But we hope that as they keep on improving the law, we'll be seeing these things. I was joined by Lebogang George. If you're not paying attention, so at this point in time, I would like to wrap up so that we can be able to go and do other things. My name is Lawrence Seretse. This is the Punchline Podcast. I'll see you next week.